Let's be brutally honest for a moment. If she wanted to contact you, she would. Period. It takes what? 30 seconds to send a text, or less, 10 seconds. In a world where people take their phones to the bathroom, where the average person checks their device 96 times a day, that's once every 10 minutes. The too busy excuse doesn't really hold water, does it? When she doesn't call or message you for a long time, it's not what you think. It's been how long now? Days? Weeks? The time stretches out like an endless road. Your mind has been spinning stories, hasn't it? Creating these elaborate narratives about what her silence means. Maybe she's just busy. Maybe her phone broke. Maybe she's going through something and needs space. And this is the one that keeps you up at night. Maybe she's lost interest. Maybe she's found someone else. Or maybe you never really mattered to her at all. I can feel your chest tightening just thinking about it. That's normal. That's human. But here's what you need to understand, and understand deeply. Her silence is speaking volumes. It's not meaningless. It's not random. And it's not usually what your free and anxious mind is telling you it is. The truth is both simpler and more complex than the stories you've been telling yourself. I can feel you resisting this truth. I understand. It cuts deep. But stay with me. Her silence isn't just an absence of communication. It's a form of communication itself, and you need to listen to what it's telling you. Think about the people you truly value. Would you let days, weeks pass without reaching out to them, without checking in, without letting them know you're thinking about them? Be honest with yourself. When someone goes silent, they're making a choice. A deliberate choice to not prioritize connecting with you. And that choice reveals something fundamental about where you stand in their life. The people we value, we make time for. No matter how busy life gets, no matter what chaos is swirling around us, we find those few seconds to send a text, to make a call, to maintain the connection that matters to us. So when she doesn't do that for you, what is she really saying? She's saying you're not a priority. She's saying that maintaining a connection with you isn't important enough to warrant those few seconds of her day. That's not me being harsh. That's me being real with you. Because you deserve that reality, however painful it might be to face. I know you're probably thinking about all the special circumstances, all the unique aspects of your situation that might explain the silence. And yes, there are exceptions. There are times when people go through things so overwhelming that they shut down completely. But ask yourself honestly, is that what's happening here? Or are you creating excuses because the truth is too painful to accept? Let me tell you something that might change everything for you. Something that flips the script entirely. Her silence isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of her choices, and her choices aren't your responsibility. Read that again. Her choices are not your responsibility. You've been tying yourself in knots trying to understand why she isn't reaching out. Analyzing every interaction, every message, every moment you shared together, looking for clues about what you did wrong, what you could have done differently. But what if it's not about you at all? What if her silence has everything to do with her, her issues, her patterns, her limitations, and nothing to do with your value as a person? This is where you need to make a fundamental shift in how you're approaching this situation. Instead of asking, "Why isn't she messaging me?" start asking, "Why am I allowing someone's silence to determine my self-worth?" Instead of checking your phone every 5 minutes, check in with yourself, with how you're feeling, with what you truly need in your relationships. Because here's the truth that will set you free if you let it. You deserve someone who chooses to communicate with you, who makes you a priority, who values your connection enough to nurture it consistently. You deserve someone whose actions align with their words, someone who doesn't leave you hanging in silence, drowning in your own insecurities and doubts. And until you truly believe that, until you internalize that truth so deeply that it becomes part of your DNA, you'll keep finding yourself in this same situation, staring at your phone, waiting for a message that isn't coming, trying to decode someone else's silence instead of listening to your own inner voice. That voice that's been trying to tell you all along, you are worthy of more than this. So tonight, as you lie there in the darkness, as you feel that familiar ache of waiting, I want you to consider something radical. What if her silence is actually a gift? What if it's showing you exactly what you need to see about this connection, about what you've been accepting, about what you truly deserve? What if, and stay with me here, what if her silence is actually the universe conspiring in your favor? What if this painful absence of communication is actually saving you from something far worse down the line? I want you to consider a perspective that might feel foreign at first, but could change everything about how you're experiencing this situation. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Her silence is showing you something fundamental about how she handles relationships, about her capacity for consideration, about her ability to prioritize connections that matter. Is that really what you want in your life? Someone who can disappear without explanation? Someone who leaves you hanging in emotional limbo? Of course it's not. But right now you're caught in what psychologists call the intermittent reinforcement trap. It's the most powerful behavioral conditioning pattern known. It's what makes gambling so addictive. It's what keeps people checking their phones 100 times a day. When rewards come unpredictably, when you never know when that message is going to arrive, when that call is going to come through, it creates a compulsive checking behavior that's almost impossible to break. And that's exactly what her silence is doing to you. Those rare moments when she does reach out, they feel disproportionately good. They flood your brain with dopamine. They reinforce the waiting, the checking, the hoping. But they're just enough to keep you hooked, just enough to keep you invested, not enough to give you what you actually deserve. Think about that. Really let it sink in. You're caught in a psychological trap as powerful as any addiction, and breaking free requires something that might feel impossible right now. Walking away from the possibility of that next hit of connection. I know that's not what you want to hear. You want tactics, strategies, ways to get her to respond. You want me to tell you that if you wait long enough, if you play it cool enough, if you say just the right thing, she'll come back. But I respect you too much to lie to you. The hard truth is that genuine connection can't be manipulated into existence. It can't be strategized. It can't be won through some perfect combination of patience and tactics. It exists or it doesn't. And when it exists, it doesn't leave you hanging like this. Real connection doesn't play games with your mental health. It doesn't leave you checking your phone until 3 a.m., analyzing and overanalyzing every possible reason for silence. Look at how much mental and emotional energy you've already expended on this situation. Hours of your life spent wondering, waiting, hoping. Energy that could have been directed toward people who actually show up for you, toward goals that actually move your life forward, toward building the kind of self-worth that would make this kind of treatment unacceptable to you. I want you to do something right now, something that might feel uncomfortable. I want you to put your phone down, just for a few minutes, and I want you to sit with the feelings that immediately surge up when you do that. The anxiety, the fear of missing out, the worry that the moment you stop checking is the moment she'll finally reach out. Sit with those feelings. Don't run from them. Don't numb them. Just observe them like you're watching waves crash on a shore. Because those feelings aren't really about her at all. They're about something much deeper. They're about your fear that you're not enough. Your fear that if this connection slips away, another one won't come. Your fear that there's something fundamentally unlovable about you that causes people to drift away. I need you to hear this. Those fears are lying to you. You are enough, exactly as you are, with all your flaws and strengths, with all your light and shadow. You are worthy of connection that doesn't disappear, communication that doesn't leave you guessing, love that doesn't leave you doubting. Her silence isn't evidence of your unworthiness. If anything, it's evidence of her inability to show up fully in relationship, to communicate honestly, to honor the vulnerability of connection. And that's not something you can fix. It's not something you can change through perfect patience or perfect words or perfect timing. It's something she has to recognize and address herself, and whether she ever does, that is completely outside your control. What is within your control is how long you're willing to wait in this limbo, how long you're willing to put your emotional well-being on hold for someone who isn't currently choosing you. I know it feels impossible to walk away from the potential, the possibility that she might come back, the hope that her silence is temporary, that there's a reasonable explanation, that everything can go back to how it was in those good moments. But hope can be a dangerous thing when it keeps you tethered to something that's causing you pain. Sometimes the most self-loving choice you can make is to release that hope, to accept what is rather than clinging to what might be. I'm not saying it's easy. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. But on the other side of that choice is freedom. Freedom from the constant checking. Freedom from the endless analysis. Freedom from tying your worth to someone else's communication patterns. On the other side is the space to attract connections that match your energy, your consideration, your capacity for showing up. Because here's what I know for certain: when someone values you, they don't leave you in silence. They don't leave you wondering. They don't leave you creating elaborate explanations for their absence. They communicate even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. And you deserve nothing less than that. So tonight, as you lie there with your thoughts racing, with that familiar ache in your chest, I want you to consider that her silence might be teaching you the most valuable lesson: how to value yourself enough to walk away from connections that don't serve your highest good. How to create enough self-worth that someone's absence doesn't feel like a referendum on your value as a human being. How to recognize that you are the prize, not someone who can't even muster the decency to send a text message. This realization doesn't happen overnight. It's not a switch you flip once and never struggle again. It's a practice, a daily recommitment to your own worth. But it begins with a single moment of clarity, a moment just like this one, where you finally see the situation for what it is, not what you wish it could be. And that moment of clarity, it's going to hurt like hell at first, because it means letting go of the story you've been telling yourself, the story that's been keeping hope alive. You know the one I'm talking about. The story that says her silence is temporary, that there's a perfect explanation waiting just around the corner, that if you're patient enough, understanding enough, if you give her enough space, everything will go back to how it was in those good moments. It's a beautiful story, a comforting story, but it's keeping you trapped in a cycle of waiting and disappointment. Have you ever wondered why this situation feels so unbearably painful? Why her silence cuts deeper than perhaps it logically should? It's because her absence isn't just triggering current pain, it's activating old wounds, ancient patterns, the original abandonment. We all carry these wounds to some degree. The first time we reached out and no one was there. The first time we expressed a need and it went unmet. The first time we were vulnerable and got hurt in return. Those early experiences created neural pathways in our brains. They taught us what to expect from relationships, what was safe and what wasn't, how much of ourselves to reveal, how much to trust another person's presence. And when someone goes silent on us, especially someone we've developed feelings for, it doesn't just hurt in the present moment. It hurts because it connects to every other time we've felt abandoned, ignored, or unseen. It's like an earthquake along a fault line that was established decades ago. That's why your reaction might feel disproportionate, why you find yourself obsessing, ruminating, unable to focus on anything else. Why this silence feels like it's consuming your entire life. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish very well between past and present threats. It knows this pattern. It recognizes the sensation of someone important becoming unreachable. And it goes into full alert mode, flooding your body with stress hormones, narrowing your focus to this single situation. It's trying to protect you from what it perceives as a primal threat, abandonment. Understanding this doesn't immediately stop the pain, but it does help you begin to separate what's happening now from what happened then. To recognize that your intense reaction isn't crazy or weak, it's human. It's your psyche trying to process both present and past wounds simultaneously. And just recognizing that can help you begin to show yourself the compassion you deserve. Because here's something I need you to really hear: your need for communication, for clarity, for consideration. It's not unreasonable. It's not asking too much. It's the bare minimum of what anyone deserves in a relationship of any kind. You're not being needy for wanting someone to respond to you. You're not being dramatic for feeling hurt by prolonged silence. You're experiencing a normal human reaction to what amounts to emotional neglect. Let that sink in. What you're experiencing is a form of emotional neglect, and you've been gaslighting yourself about it, telling yourself you're overreacting, that you should be more understanding, more patient, less affected by someone essentially treating you as if you don't exist. That ends today. Today, you start honoring your own emotional needs as valid, as important, as worthy of respect from others and from yourself. This doesn't mean lashing out. It doesn't mean sending angry messages or making demands. That would only be giving your power away further. It means something much more powerful, accepting reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. The reality is, for whatever reason, this person has chosen not to prioritize communication with you. That's not a judgment on your worth. It's simply information about their choices, their limitations, their priorities. And that information is invaluable, because it tells you everything you need to know about whether this connection can ever provide what you need and deserve. People who disappear without explanation, who can't manage basic communication, even when things get difficult, they aren't ready for real relationship. They aren't equipped to navigate the inevitable challenges that arise when two humans try to connect authentically. That's not a character assassination, it's just the truth. Their emotional equipment isn't currently calibrated for the kind of relationship that would actually fulfill you. And no amount of patience, understanding, or self-diminishment on your part can change that. Only they can do the work to develop those capacities. Only they can choose to address whatever internal barriers prevent them from showing up consistently. And that work takes time, commitment, and usually professional support. It's not something you can inspire them to do by waiting patiently, by being understanding of their silence, by accepting crumbs of connection when they decide to offer them. In fact, accepting those patterns only enables them to continue avoiding their own growth. So in a strange way, the most loving thing you can do both for yourself and for them is to stop accepting what doesn't serve your highest good. To stop making excuses for behavior that causes you pain. This doesn't mean hating them. It doesn't mean deciding they're a terrible person. It simply means seeing clearly that what they're currently capable of offering doesn't align with what you need and deserve, and then making choices that honor that truth. What might those choices look like? First, it means stopping the constant checking, the hoping, the creating of scenarios where her silence makes sense and doesn't mean what you fear it means. It means accepting that maybe, just maybe, she's showing you exactly who she is and how she handles relationship, and believing what she's showing you. It means redirecting all that mental and emotional energy you've been pouring into analyzing her silence back toward yourself, toward your growth, your goals, your connections with people who actually show up consistently. It means developing what therapists call a secure attachment to yourself, learning to self-soothe when the anxiety spikes, to validate your own emotional needs when others don't, to provide yourself with the reassurance and stability that you've been seeking externally. This isn't something that happens overnight. It's a practice, a daily recommitment to your own worth and well-being. And yes, it means being willing to walk away, to close the door on what's causing you pain, even if that means letting go of the possibility that things could change. Because as long as you're waiting in limbo, you're unavailable for connections that could actually fulfill you. You're energetically tied to a situation that's proven harmful to your well-being. I know this is hard to hear. I know it feels impossible to implement when you're in the thick of the pain. But I also know this. On the other side of this challenge is a version of you that doesn't tie your worth to someone else's communication patterns. A version of you that can recognize early when someone isn't capable of meeting your legitimate needs. A version of you that doesn't settle for breadcrumbs because you know you deserve the whole loaf. That version of you is waiting. And the only way to become them is to start making choices now that honor your worth, especially when others don't. Let me tell you something that might sound completely counterintuitive right now. Something that goes against everything your anxious mind has been telling you during these sleepless nights. Her silence might be the greatest gift you've ever received. Not because it doesn't hurt. It does, deeply, excruciatingly. But because pain is often our greatest teacher. And this particular pain is teaching you something essential about yourself, about relationships, about what you've been willing to accept. Think about what happened before the silence fell. If you're really honest with yourself, were there signs, little moments where you felt unseen, where you sensed something was off but pushed the feeling away, where you made excuses for behavior that didn't quite align with the connection you thought you had? The silence didn't come from nowhere. It was preceded by 1,000 tiny moments where something deeper was being communicated, but you weren't quite ready to hear it. I'm not saying this to blame you. Not at all. We all do this. We all have blind spots when it comes to our attachments, our hopes, our desires for connection. But now the silence is forcing you to see what you couldn't or wouldn't see before. It's forcing you to confront the reality of the connection, not the fantasy of it. And while that confrontation is painful, it's also the beginning of your liberation. Because living in fantasy keeps you stuck. It keeps you investing in potential rather than reality. It keeps you giving your precious energy to a connection that exists more in your mind than in the actual day-to-day interactions between you. The most painful truth might be this: the relationship you're mourning may not be the relationship you actually had. It might be the relationship you hoped to have. The one you glimpsed in those early, promising moments. The one you believed could develop if only enough time passed, enough understanding was offered, enough patience was extended. But real connection isn't built on hope alone. It's built on consistent action, on showing up even when it's difficult, on communication that persists through challenges, on mutual investment in each other's well-being. And her silence is showing you, without ambiguity, that those elements aren't present, at least not from her side. Now comes the hardest part. The part where you have to decide what you're going to do with this information. Because make no mistake, this is a decision point. A moment where you get to choose which path you'll follow. One path keeps you waiting, hoping, checking your phone, making excuses, diminishing your needs to accommodate her absence. It keeps you in the familiar pain of wanting something from someone who isn't giving it freely. The other path is terrifying precisely because it's unfamiliar. It's the path where you stop waiting, where you accept what is, where you begin the process of detaching your sense of worth from her response or lack thereof. This path feels like stepping off a cliff at first. There's that moment of free fall, of absolute terror. What if she comes back right after I let go? What if this silence was just temporary and I gave up too soon? What if I never find another connection like the one I thought we had? These fears will try to pull you back to the familiar path, the waiting path, the path where your worth remains tied to her validation. But if you can find the courage to keep walking forward, something remarkable begins to happen. You start to breathe more easily. You start to remember who you were before this situation consumed your mental and emotional energy. You start to recognize just how much of yourself you've been suppressing to maintain the possibility of her return. And most importantly, you begin to remember that you existed before her, that your worth was intact before she entered your life, that your capacity for joy, for connection, for purpose doesn't depend on any single person's presence or absence. This remembering is the beginning of your healing. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not a lightning strike of clarity that instantly transforms your feelings. It's more like the slow rising of the sun after a long dark night, gradual, almost imperceptible at first, but inevitably bringing light to what was shrouded in darkness. And in that growing light, you start to see things differently. You see that her silence says far more about her capacity for relationship than it does about your worthiness for love. You see that by keeping yourself emotionally available to someone who's demonstrably unavailable, you've been participating in your own suffering. You see that the anxiety, the constant checking, the ruminating, they've become habits. Patterns of thought and behavior that can be unlearned just as they were learned. This seeing clearly is the foundation upon which you'll build a new relationship with yourself. One based not on external validation, but on internal worth. Not on another person's presence, but on your own unwavering commitment to your well-being. How do you begin this process in practical terms? It starts with tiny acts of self-reclamation. Delete the text thread you've been rereading obsessively, analyzing for clues about what went wrong. Remove her from your social media, at least temporarily, so you're not constantly exposed to updates that trigger the pain in you. Tell a trusted friend what you're going through. Name the pain. Bring it out of the shadows of your mind and into the light of shared human experience. Create a simple mantra that you can repeat when the anxiety spikes. Her silence is information. It's showing me what I need to know. Set a timer for 5 minutes when you feel the overwhelming urge to check your phone or ruminate on the situation. Allow yourself to feel everything, the longing, the hurt, the fear for those 5 minutes. Then, when the timer goes off, consciously shift your focus to something else. Something tangible, something in the present moment. Start rebuilding the parts of your life that have been neglected while your focus has been consumed by this situation. Reconnect with friends, revisit hobbies that once brought you joy. Move your body in ways that release the tension you've been carrying. These actions might seem small, even trivial compared to the magnitude of your pain, but they're not about instantly feeling better. They're about creating a new pattern, a new path forward, one tiny step at a time. And as you take these steps, something remarkable begins to happen. The intensity of the pain begins to shift, not because you've stopped caring, not because you've built walls around your heart, but because you're no longer feeding the pain with your attention, your hope, your constant checking and waiting. You're no longer making her silence the center of your emotional universe. This shift doesn't happen overnight. There will be setbacks, moments where the old pattern reasserts itself with a vengeance. Times when a song, a memory, a random association sends you tumbling back into the raw pain of her absence. When these moments come, and they will come, treat yourself with the compassion you'd offer a dear friend in pain. Don't add shame to your suffering by berating yourself for still not being over it. Healing isn't linear, it's messy. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 3 steps back. But if you keep returning to these practices of self-reclamation, if you keep choosing the path of self-worth over the path of waiting, eventually those setbacks become less frequent, less overwhelming, less defining. And in their place grows something beautiful, a relationship with yourself based on unwavering presence, on showing up for your own needs with the consistency and care that you've been seeking externally. This relationship with yourself, it's the foundation everything else is built upon. It's the bedrock, the core. And for too long it's been neglected while you've been pouring your energy into decoding someone else's silence. I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine that your relationship with yourself is like a house, your house, the place where you live every moment of every day. For too long, you've been standing outside someone else's house, peering in through the windows, hoping they'll open the door and invite you in. You've been neglecting your own home, letting the pipes freeze, the roof leak, the foundation crack, all while waiting for admission to a place that isn't even yours to maintain. Her silence is calling you back to your own house, to the only home you'll inhabit for your entire life, your relationship with yourself. And yes, that house might need work right now. It might feel cold, empty, unfamiliar after you've spent so long focusing elsewhere. But it's yours, and it's the only space you have complete agency to transform. So how do you begin this renovation, this return to self? It starts with a radical shift in how you interpret her silence. Until now, you've been reading her absence as a story about you, about your inadequacy, your mistakes, your fundamental unworthiness. But what if her silence is actually a story about her fear of intimacy, her inability to communicate directly, her pattern of avoiding discomfort by disappearing rather than having difficult conversations, about her attachment style likely avoidant that causes her to pull away precisely when connection deepens, about her unresolved wounds that get triggered when relationships move beyond the initial surface level phase? What if her silence has absolutely nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with her limitations? This perspective shift changes everything, because suddenly her absence isn't a judgment on your value as a person. It's simply information about where she is in her own journey, about what she's currently capable of offering. And while that doesn't immediately stop the pain of her absence, it does begin to loosen its grip on your sense of self. Because here's a truth that your anxious mind has been obscuring. Not everyone is capable of the kind of connection you're seeking. Not everyone has done the internal work necessary to show up consistently, to communicate honestly, to navigate the inevitable challenges that arise when 2 separate humans try to build something meaningful together. This isn't about placing blame, it's about seeing clearly. Some people retreat into silence because they never learned how to express difficult emotions. Their family of origin may have modeled conflict avoidance, emotional suppression, disappearing acts when things got tough. Some people pull away because genuine connection triggers their deepest fears: fear of engulfment, fear of control, fear of being truly seen with all their flaws and wounds. Some people create distance because they're trying to manage their own anxiety about relationship, their own terror of vulnerability, their own uncertainty about what they want and need. And some people, yes, simply aren't interested enough to prioritize communication. They've moved on, found someone else, decided the connection wasn't what they wanted, but lacked the maturity or courage to say so directly. In any of these scenarios, the core truth remains the same. Her silence is revealing her capacity, not your worth. Let that sink in. Her silence is revealing her capacity, not your worth. Whether she's afraid, avoidant, conflict-averse, or simply not interested, none of these states reflect your inherent value as a human being worthy of love and connection. They reflect where she is, her limitations, her choices, her journey. And those aren't things you can control, fix, or influence through perfect patience or understanding. This recognition that her silence is about her, not you, is the first step in reclaiming your power in this situation. Because as long as you're reading her absence as a referendum on your worth, you remain emotionally hostage to her next move. You stay trapped in the cycle of checking, waiting, hoping, despairing. But when you recognize that her silence is simply showing you who she is and what she's capable of right now, you can begin to make decisions based on what you need and deserve, rather than on how to get her to respond. And what you deserve is someone whose actions consistently demonstrate that you matter. Someone who understands that communication is a basic act of care in any meaningful relationship. Someone who may need space, sometimes we all do, but communicates that need directly rather than disappearing. You deserve someone who shows up. And until you fully embrace that truth, until you stop making excuses for behavior that causes you pain, you'll remain caught in patterns that reinforce the very wound you're trying to heal. This doesn't mean you'll never feel pain in relationships again. Pain is part of human connection. We're all flawed, learning, growing beings who will inevitably hurt each other at times. But there's a world of difference between the pain that comes from honest struggle within a connection and the pain that comes from absence of connection itself. The first is part of building something real together. The second is a sign that something essential is missing. Her silence is telling you that something essential is missing. Are you listening? Not to the stories your anxious mind is creating about what her silence means about you, but to the clear information her absence is providing about what she's capable of offering. Because once you really hear that message, once you accept it not as a temporary state that will change if you just wait long enough, but as valuable information about who she is right now, you can finally begin to make choices that honor your own needs rather than diminishing them to accommodate her limitations. And that's where true healing begins, not in getting her to respond, not in understanding perfectly why she went silent, but in choosing yourself, in recognizing that no connection, no matter how promising it once seemed, is worth sacrificing your fundamental need for consistency, communication, and care. The person who goes silent for extended periods without explanation isn't currently capable of meeting those needs. Full stop. And acknowledging that reality, painful as it is the first step toward creating space for connections that can. This journey of reclamation doesn't happen in a straight line. There will be days when you feel strong, clear, certain that you're moving forward. And then there will be days when a memory ambushes you. When the familiar ache returns with such force, it takes your breath away. When you find yourself back in the checking, the hoping, the waiting. These setbacks aren't failures. They're part of the process. The heart doesn't heal in a single clean break. It heals in layers, in cycles, in a gradual unwinding of attachment that happens over time. Be gentle with yourself on the difficult days, but be honest too. Because here's what happens if you don't fully process this experience: you carry it forward, into your next connection, into every potential relationship. You bring the unhealed wound, the fear of abandonment, the terror of silence into each new beginning. And that fear becomes a filter through which you see everything. Every delayed response becomes potential abandonment. Every need for space becomes the beginning of the end. Every normal fluctuation in communication becomes evidence that history is repeating itself. This hypervigilance, this constant scanning for signs of impending silence becomes exhausting, not just for you, but for anyone trying to connect with you. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your fear of being left creates exactly the dynamic you're most afraid of. That's why this healing work is so essential. Not just to process the current pain, but to prevent it from bleeding into your future connections. So how do you heal from this specific wound? The wound of someone's silence. It starts with radical acceptance. Not resignation, not giving up hope, but a clear-eyed acceptance of what is rather than what you wish could be. She has shown you through her silence what she's capable of offering right now. Not in a moment of stress or unusual circumstance, but as her default way of handling whatever is happening in her inner or outer world. When things got difficult, whether because of her feelings, external circumstances, or something in the dynamic between you, her response was to disconnect, to go silent, to leave you wondering, waiting, creating explanations for her absence. That is information about her emotional equipment, about how she handles relationship challenges, about her current capacity for the kind of connection you're seeking. And no amount of understanding, patience, or self-diminishment on your part can upgrade that equipment for her. Only she can do that work. Only she can recognize her patterns, understand their roots, and commit to developing new ways of relating that don't cause harm through absence. And that work, if she chooses to do it at all, is her journey, not yours. Your journey is to develop what therapists call earned security, to heal the wounded parts of you that made her silence feel like confirmation of your deepest fears about your worth, to build the kind of relationship with yourself that doesn't collapse when someone else disappears. This is work that happens from the inside out. It's not about finding the perfect strategy to prevent future abandonment. It's about becoming the kind of person who knows bone deep that another's absence doesn't define your value. It starts with looking squarely at the story her silence triggered in you. What old wounds did it activate? What core beliefs about yourself did it seem to confirm? Was it the belief that you're too much, too needy, too emotional, too intense for anyone to stick around? Was it the belief that you're not enough, not interesting enough, attractive enough, worthy enough to merit ongoing attention? Was it the belief that love is inherently unreliable, that connection always ends in abandonment, that getting close to someone inevitably leads to pain? These core beliefs didn't start with her silence. They were there before, dormant perhaps, but present. Her absence simply activated them, brought them roaring to the surface, made them feel undeniably true. But here's the thing about these beliefs. They're not facts, they're interpretations. Stories you created to make sense of early experiences where your needs weren't met, where connection was disrupted, where love felt conditional or inconsistent. And stories can be rewritten. Not easily, not overnight, but gradually, persistently, through a combination of self-awareness, new experiences, and often professional support. This rewriting happens as you begin to treat yourself with the consistency, care, and communication you're seeking from others. As you show up for yourself in the ways you've been waiting for someone else to show up for you. It happens as you practice setting and maintaining boundaries about how you'll allow yourself to be treated. As you stop accepting breadcrumbs of connection because you've convinced yourself that's all you deserve. It happens as you begin to recognize the early warning signs of someone who's not capable of the kind of relationship you're seeking. The subtle red flags that preceded the silence. The moments where you felt unseen or unheard, but pushed the feeling away because the connection seemed so promising in other ways. And perhaps most importantly, it happens as you allow yourself to grieve. Not just the loss of this specific person, but the loss of the fantasy, the potential, the vision you had of what could have been. This grief is necessary. It's the bridge between holding on and letting go, between living in possibility and accepting reality. And it's messy, raw, non-linear. It comes in waves that crash over you when you least expect it. In the grocery store, in the shower, in those quiet moments before sleep when your defenses are down. Let it come. Let it move through you. Don't try to outrun it or numb it or intellectualize it away. Because on the other side of this grief is something precious, freedom. Freedom from waiting, from checking, from tying your worth to someone else's ability to show up. Freedom to recognize and attract connections that match your capacity for presence, for communication, for working through challenges together rather than disappearing when things get hard. This freedom doesn't mean never getting hurt again. Vulnerability always carries that risk, But it does mean developing the internal resources to handle hurt without losing yourself in the process. It means knowing that you can survive someone's silence, that it doesn't define you, that you have the capacity to feel the pain fully and still move forward toward what you deserve. And what you deserve is so much more than what you've been accepting. You deserve someone who sees silence as a last resort, not a default response to difficulty. You deserve someone who understands that consistent communication isn't just a nice-to-have in relationship, it's a fundamental act of care. You deserve someone who recognizes that real connection requires courage. The courage to stay present even when emotions get messy, to communicate directly even when it's uncomfortable, to work through challenges together rather than checking out when things get hard. You deserve someone whose actions align with their words, who doesn't love bomb you with attention and promises in the beginning only to disappear when the initial excitement fades. You deserve someone whose maturity matches yours, who's done enough of their own inner work to know how to navigate the inevitable ups and downs of human connection without causing unnecessary harm through absence. And most importantly, you deserve to recognize these truths not as abstract concepts, but as the foundation upon which you build every relationship moving forward. The painful gift of her silence is that it's forcing you to confront where your standards have been, what you've been willing to accept, the disconnection you've been rationalizing because the alternative, walking away from the possibility of her return, felt too frightening to face. But here you are facing it, reading these words, taking them in, perhaps resisting some of them, resonating deeply with others, but engaging with the fundamental truth they contain. Her silence is showing you exactly what you need to see about this connection. Not what you want to see, not what you've been hoping to see, but what you need to see to finally free yourself from the limbo of waiting. This recognition doesn't make the pain disappear. In some ways, it might temporarily intensify it, because accepting reality when that reality hurts requires a courage that avoidance doesn't. But it's a different quality of pain. It's the pain of healing rather than the pain of prolonged injury. It's the pain of muscles rebuilding after atrophy, of blood flowing back into a limb that's been numb. It's the pain that leads somewhere, to growth, to wisdom, to a version of yourself that doesn't tie your worth to someone else's ability to communicate. I want you to imagine that version of yourself for a moment. Really see them. Feel what it would be like to inhabit their skin. This future you has integrated the lesson of her silence so deeply that it's become wisdom rather than wound. They've transformed the pain into clarity about what they need in relationship, into an unwavering commitment to never again diminish their needs to accommodate someone else's inability to meet them. This version of you doesn't check their phone compulsively, doesn't analyze and overanalyze every interaction for signs of impending abandonment, doesn't walk on eggshells trying to be the perfect version of themselves to prevent someone from leaving. This version of you recognizes that the right connection doesn't require that kind of anxious vigilance, that when someone values you, they show it consistently through their actions, through their presence, through their willingness to communicate, especially when things get difficult. This future you understands deep in their bones that anyone who can go silent for extended periods without explanation isn't currently capable of the kind of relationship you deserve. Not because they're a bad person, but because their emotional equipment simply isn't calibrated for real partnership. And this version of you no longer takes that personally, no longer reads it as a reflection of your worth, but simply as information about compatibility, about capacity, about what's possible with this particular person at this particular time. This future you have stopped trying to decode someone else's silence and started listening to your own inner voice, the one that's been trying to tell you all along that you deserve more than this. That connection shouldn't be this hard. That love doesn't leave you constantly questioning, constantly anxious, constantly afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. This version of you has developed what therapists call earned security. The ability to maintain a stable sense of self-worth regardless of whether any specific relationship works out. The capacity to feel the pain of rejection or ending without spiraling into self-doubt or self-blame. This future you still gets hurt sometimes. That's part of being human, part of being vulnerable, but they know how to hold that hurt without being defined by it, how to learn from it without letting it close their heart, how to use it as information for future choices rather than evidence of some fundamental flaw. This version of you recognizes the early warning signs of someone who's not emotionally available, who can't or won't communicate directly, who disappears rather than working through challenges together. And this version of you doesn't try to fix those people, doesn't make excuses for their behavior, doesn't diminish your own needs to accommodate their limitations. Instead, they thank them for the clarity, for showing you who they are before you invested even more of your precious time and energy, for making space in your life for connections that can actually fulfill you. This future you understands that her silence wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a failure on your part. It wasn't even personal, really. It was guidance. Painful guidance, yes, but guidance nonetheless, showing you exactly what you needed to see about this connection, about your patterns, about what you've been accepting that falls so far short of what you deserve. The journey from where you are now to becoming that future self isn't easy. It's not a straight line. It's messy and non-linear, and sometimes it will feel like you're moving backward rather than forward. But every time you choose to see her silence as information rather than indictment, you take a step on that path. Every time you resist the urge to reach out one more time, to try one more approach, to find the perfect words that might finally make her respond, you take a step on that path. Every time you redirect your energy from analyzing her absence to building your presence in your own life, you take a step on that path. Every time you practice self-compassion instead of self-criticism when the pain resurfaces, you take a step on that path. And gradually, through consistent practice, these steps become a journey. This journey becomes transformation. This transformation becomes the foundation of a new chapter, one where your worth is no longer tied to someone else's presence or absence. One where you recognize that the right connection won't leave you in silence, won't leave you wondering, won't leave you making excuses for behavior that causes you pain. The right connection will be clear, consistent, characterized by mutual effort and open communication, even during difficult times. It won't be perfect, no human connection is, but it won't leave you doubting where you stand. It won't leave you checking your phone 100 times a day, hoping for a message that never comes. And until that connection arrives, you'll be building the most important relationship of all, the one with yourself. Learning to provide yourself with the validation, the consistency, the unwavering presence you've been seeking externally, so that when the right connection does arrive, you'll recognize it instantly. Not because it feels like the desperate longing, the anxious attachment, the fear of loss you've mistaken for love in the past. That future is waiting for you, and it begins with accepting this truth, however painful. When she doesn't call or message you for a long time, it's not a mystery to be solved. It's not a test to be passed. It's not a challenge to overcome through perfect patience or perfect words. It's information. Clear, undeniable information about what she's currently capable of offering. And what she's capable of offering isn't enough. Not for you. Not for what you deserve. Not for the kind of love that's waiting on the other side of finally letting go. If you like this video, do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and perhaps leave a comment as well. See you next time.